Hey everyone, welcome to Thought Crime and Keto and Crime. Today I've got a tough one for you. I've got the story of Ilse Koch, the bitch of Buchenwald, however you want to phrase that. She's called a myriad of things. A very disturbing story that I will start with some background on perhaps why she was the way she was, but it's definitely part of the darker side of history. And with that being said, before we dive into it, I do want to give a shout out to all the new subscribers. I don't know if any of you know, but way back when I started YouTube back in 2016, hungry for views and hungry to grow my channel, I jumped into a genre known as Hater Nation, Haydur, Hater Nation, that revolve around reaction videos to two YouTubers, Amberlynn Reid and Chantel Marie. Now, or Feudy Beauty as she's actually known here on YouTube. And I jumped headfirst into that, and it did get me my first 1,000 subscribers pretty quickly. It allowed me to, hone some reactionary type of joke telling. But overall, I was building my channel on being mean and cruel to two very obese women. I'm very obese. I have no right to judge them. But yet, I jumped into this, and it did help me grow my channel. After about a year of doing this, I looked into the mirror after some behesting from my wife and said, "This is not who you are." So, I stopped doing reactions immediately. I switched to keto and true crime content, and I went back and privated all of those videos that I had done making fun of Amberlynn Reid. I immediately lost a bunch of subscribers, but then I found new ones via true crime, and I have my wonderful community and family that I have now. But I did want to say that I got up the courage to go to Amberlynn Reid's live stream and actually apologize to her live on camera, and she acknowledged the apology and told me it wasn't necessary. And then, to show what a good-hearted person she is, she shouted out my channel, and as a result, I now have new subscribers. So welcome to all of you from Amberlynn Reid. Thank you so much. I will make sure that going forward I'm never cruel to anybody just for the sake of views and likes. And so with that being said, let's jump into today's story. And as always, this video is brought to you by our brand new full channel partner, Keto Crisp. The wonderful folks over at tastecando.com have officially signed on to partner with me in both my weight loss journey, which I am back on now, as well as sponsoring the channel. They have signed me up for a brand new affiliate program, so if you click the link down below, as well as put in my discount code, you'll receive 15% off your first order, and I do get a tiny commission if you do purchase. So it helps the channel, and you get something tasty and healthy. These are great bars. They satisfy. They keep you full for a long time. They have a lot of great nutrients, a lot of great natural ingredients. And for those of us in the keto and low-carb world, we've often been demonized as not a friend to the animals, but these are 100% plant-based. So you can feel good about that too if you are of the vegetarian or vegan keto lifestyle. These are also for you. So with that being said, I want to say a huge shout out to Keto Crisp for sponsoring the channel and helping me to stay on the air here. And thank you all. So if you'd like to order some, definitely check them out below. I appreciate it. Before we get into talking about Ilse herself, I want to talk about how we got there. How did this apparently psychotic woman get access to people that weren't even considered human, to allow her to do the things that she did. To do that, we have to study what happened to all of Europe, really, after World War I. When WWI ended in 1918, there were over 37 million deaths and untold billions of dollars in damage to the European continent. And these deaths range from both the Central Powers, the Allies, and span not only Europe but North America, as the United States and Canada also had entered into the war, as we know. The most decimated, of course, were the Central Powers because they lost, namely Germany. Germany, who was blamed for the war, actually, due to the Treaty of Versailles, which was ratified in 1919, they had to pay out millions of dollars in restitutions to the Allies to help rebuild their country while their country was left to suffer. They also had were limited to about 100,000 military total. That's all that they could have as a result of the sanctions put on them for causing a world war. And as a result, they went into a deep depression. Absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts. They were suffering financially. And the general consensus among those that lived in Germany, your average German, was that somebody, namely those on the left wing, had stabbed Germany in the back and sabotaged their war effort. And who did they see as the main representation of the left wing? Communists, because Germany was a multi-party system. Even though they had a Kaiser, they still had a parliamentary form of government, so they had left-wing politicians, social democrats, communists, conservative parties, everything you can imagine. They also had people that were different than others, namely gypsies. There was a huge migration from the Slavic countries of gypsies, nomadic people, into the heart of Germany. Homosexuals they saw as representation of anti-German, anti-conservative, anti-establishment, traditional mores as bad people, and the Jewish people. The Jewish people were different than your average German. They did not practice Christianity. They seemed to have an unusual slice of entrepreneurship because they were very driven people. And they honestly had no home country of their own. So like the gypsies, they were considered almost a parasite by a lot of the establishment, normal, everyday Germans that saw themselves put upon by these people. And then this was fed later on by Adolf Hitler and his propaganda machine, because Adolf Hitler would be instrumental, of course, in this, and he very well put it in his novel Mein Kampf, right out there for everybody to see, that he blamed the Jews, the homosexuals, the gypsies, anybody that wasn't a traditional Aryan German for the woes of Germany. And this was feeding off a sentiment that was already there. Hitler did not invent this sentiment. It was there. Now, where did it come from? From evil in the hearts of men. That's all I can say, because that's what it is. It's evil. And so you had this pervasive outrage at these people, and forms of discrimination started to pop up. And that, coupled with the depression, made that grow. And of course, after the Kaiser was deposed, you had a new government known as the Weimar Republic, which was a full parliamentary, like you would see in England or Canada, even the United States, though it's called different things, pop up. And for a while, they started to get things back on track. But you did still have a sect of the German people that believed that this was only an illusion, that eventually it would crash. And then you had inflation, With all the massive payments going out, the German government started printing money. Where have I heard that before? To cover their debts, and then you had mass inflation, a feeling of disheartenment, and people's faith in the Weimar Republic started to wane, and this was perfect for a former German army corporal by the name of Adolf Hitler to start pumping his propaganda into the German people. In the early 1920s, 1920 to 1922, you had the rise of the German Workers' Party. This was a blue-collar type of party that really emphasized workers' rights, the power of the common German person to be able to, common German man, let's not forget, women were still considered a subclass at this time too, to be able to control themselves. And a young former German soldier named Adolf Hitler joined this party in late 1919, and eventually, because of his ability to be a good public speaker, rose to leadership very, very easily. He encouraged national pride. Nothing wrong with national pride, as long as it doesn't go to the dark side. The ability to have their own military, to expand their military. Like I said, they were limited to about 100 to 200,000 military personnel, period. And a commitment to have, this is where it gets off kilter, a commitment to have racially pure Germany. That is, nobody that wasn't of European descent. Aryan. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed being, the highest level. Those Germans' descent from the Nordic countries would be the best way. That's what he wanted. Even though he himself was brunette, brown eyes, rumored to have had Jewish ancestors. I'm not going to get into that, but that's what he wanted. As you can see, there's always a little bit of good in every evil. Pride in one's country, great. Having an adequate defense, great. And then we just get off kilter over here. So, he wanted a racially pure Germany. He blamed the Jews especially. I don't know where his hate came from, unless his father, who was involved in German government, I'm sure it came from there. Also probably just the ravings of a madman. He had tried to be an artist in Vienna, Austria. Maybe a lot of the art dealers there were Jewish. Maybe he felt they were discriminating against him, but I don't know where it came from. We all knew that Hitler was a special kind of crazy. So he condemned them. He also condemned, as I said, homosexuals, any religion outside of the normal German, mainstream Christianity, as well as the gypsies, for all of Germany's woes. And he pumped this propaganda into this party, which had grown at the end of 1920, early 1921, to about 3,000 members. And he officially became, in 1920, December-ish, the leader of the German Workers' Party, or the Führer. Hitler encouraged open revolt against the established Weimar Republic. He established the SA, which would be a forerunner to the SS, to be a kind of a paramilitary organization. They were known as the Brown Shirts because that was their uniform. And they went around to protest, starting violence, starting shenanigans to kind of, out of chaos, you can easily overtake a government. So that's what he was trying to do. In 1923, he kind of assumed that he, his SA, and the other members of the German Workers' Party, because it had grown to over 12,000 strong by this time, could eat, and we're talking about Germany, a very small country. They could overthrow the Weimar Republic, and they attempted this in 1923 by trying to overtake the Parliament building in Munich at the time. Of course, it was easily put down by the police and the German military. Hitler was put on trial for 24 days. However, you had a judge that was a German Workers' Party sympathizer, and only sentenced Hitler to 5 years in prison with eligibility for parole. He only served 1 year But while he was, and other Nazi leaders were also a Workers' Party, which they had already changed the name to to the Nazi Party as we know it. They were also given light sentences. While in prison, that's when he wrote Mein Kampf, where he laid out his entire plan for Germany and the world to have a pure Aryan world, and was systematically released from prison in late 1924, and of course in 1925 Mein Kampf was published. He emphasized eugenics, social Darwinism, and the actual pushing out of anybody that was different from what he considered the prime German. Hitler quickly revived the party, and by 1929 it had grown to over 108,000 members in Germany, all Aryan, all pretty financially stable, as stable as you could be in a very inflationary period. And he reestablished the SA, put into works the start of the SS, as well as establishing the Hitler Youth, the Student League, the Nazis for the little people, and also the Women's League, the National Socialist Women's League, as well. So they started to branch out into politics to try to win seats in the parliament. From 1925 to 1927, they really failed to get more than 3% of the total vote in any election, but they did get a few members into parliament. And then the stock market crash of 1929 and the Great Depression. By 1932, the Weimar Republic had crashed into chaos. You had riots over the ever-growing food lines, inflation, get it, and this was the chance for the Nazi Party to seize power. The duly elected Weimar president, Paul von Hindenburg, evoked emergency rights, where he basically redid the government into chancellors and cabinet ministers and a smaller parliament, and this was the chance for Hitler to strike. Late 1932, President Hindenburg was around 84 years old, did not know if he even wanted to run again, but because Adolf Hitler was one of his main opponents, his party encouraged him to please run again, which he did. He did win the election, but Hitler and the Nazis received about 37% of the vote. By this time, the Nazi Party has swelled to over 500,000 members. Their brown shirts, the SAs, are out there creating chaos, causing violence, causing upheaval, and then you have this very eloquent speaker, Adolf Hitler, saying that he can make it right, he can stabilize, and people bought that bullshit. So, you had the Nazi Party winning about 37% of parliament seats in the July 1932 parliamentary elections, and then with pressure on Hindenburg, he actually appointed Hitler as chancellor or head of the parliament. And this is where everything went off kilter. The famous Nazi propaganda, and if you want me to do a really series on the Nazis, I'm more than willing to do this. This is just barely scraping a chip off a chip off a chip of this iceberg. But basically, once Hitler was chancellor, he went about trying to get the military on his side. And the military had a huge fear of the SAs, the brown shirts. And so Hitler decided it was time to do away with the brown shirts. He started the SS, which was the startings. He also incorporated the military, and in late 1932, the newly formed SS and branches of the military attacked their own men, the SA, and put a bunch of the leaders to death. This is known as the Night of the Long Knives, and from this point on, SA became SS, and they they swelled to over 2.5 million strong, as opposed to the 100,000 that they were allowed to have in the military. So you think about it. Nazis had a private army that was not against the Treaty of Versailles now, that was, 20 times the size of the German regular army. The German army didn't have a chance to do anything, and so they acquiesced and became under the control of Hitler. And this is where they formed the ghetto system to do away with the people that Hitler said were destroying Germany. They officially created ghettos, or neighborhoods, where only these people could only live. So they were dragged from their own houses. Their businesses were closed. The Night of Broken Glass, the big riots where they destroyed all the Jewish-owned businesses in many of the major cities, happened. And so all Jews, all gypsies, all homosexuals were made to wear identifying marks and live in a ghetto. There were also, one of the first concentration camps was opened, Dachau, in 1933, and basically it was a place for political prisoners mainly, the Social Democrats, the Communists, anybody that had been fighting against the SAs or the SS during any of the rioting, any clergy that spoke out, as well as Jews were imprisoned here. It was at that time not a death camp, merely a holding camp. Not that that's any better. But from 1933 to 1941, 6 concentration camps were built. A lot of these were extermination camps built for mass extermination, gas chambers. The most popular of that, of course, is Auschwitz. There was also Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, Lublin, and Klimil, and these were spread between Germany and then Poland after he started his European conquest. Poland, Austria, and most of them had started operations by 1942, wherein we see all of the people living in the ghettos now being basically taken against their will and deported out of Germany, but they were actually being sent to these death camps. Buchenwald, which would be the camp that revolves around our story today, it was in central Germany. It had over 25 subcamps. It was mainly a work camp. It was their average life expectancy for a prisoner in most of the death camps, the ones that were there for the simply to the reason to eliminate the people, average life expectancy was 3 to 4 months, and those that lived 3 to 4 months were subjected to hard labor for basically upkeep on the camp. Buchenwald was a slave labor camp. Your average life expectancy there could be 1 to 2 years. They basically would eliminate you, send you to a death camp, shoot you, whatever, if you could not work anymore. And basically, it made valuable things that the German government, German army needed for the war effort, because by 1941 they're embroiled in, of course, a world war. And so it wasn't a death camp by definition, but there's no, it was established in 1937, one of the largest, with a huge network of subcamps, and this is where the Witch of Buchenwald did her stuff. Margaret Ilse Koch was born Margaret Ilse Kohler in Dresden, Germany in 1906. She did not exhibit any, signs of being a psychopath in her early life. By the age of 15, she entered an accountancy school. She was considered a happy child. She was her father was a laborer. He had worked in a couple of factories, but he did eventually go into more white-collar work. Very unprestigious type of growing up. She did participate in the German war effort of World War I. In 1932, she joined the Nazi Party, and then also attended many SA and SS social and political rallies. And there she met her future husband, Karl Otto Koch, in 1934, and he was a cock. was at that time the commandant of the Schatzhausen concentration and political prisoner camp in Berlin, where he did such wonderful humanitarian things. As if someone did something that displeased him, he would have the person's rear end filled with hot tar. I mean, this man was crazy. She started working for him there as a guard and and secretary, and was known for being rather cruel to the people there. This camp was mainly political prisoners, people that had challenged the Nazi Party, not necessarily all Jewish, but people that had challenged the Nazi Party. And then her husband was given the new, under construction Buchenwald concentration camp in central Germany. They moved there and were there from the time they broke ground till it was officially open. They put their mark on it. In fact, the front gate had the German version of "To Each His Own" embronzed on it by order of the Kochs, because in their opinion, you get what you deserve. That was not supposed to be uplifting. It's just you get what you deserve, and they lived up to that. Buchenwald consisted of a munitions factory, a clothing factory, lots of other things for the German war effort. But one thing it also did was become a haven for awful German medical experiments. The things that were done on twins, on gypsies, the worst kind of medical abuses you can think of, grafting of limbs, trying to change people's eye color. I don't even want to get into it because it's too horrible. It would probably be demonetized instantly if this isn't going to be demonetized because I said Hitler. But also, and this would be very important because Ilse would decide on her own type of medical experimentation. But first, she would have the prisoners build a equivalent of a $4 million building for her to ride her horse in there as well. And she would consider herself too good to do anything for herself. She did not lift a finger in the house, anywhere in the camp. She simply rode around on her horse and observed the prisoners, having them strip at her whim. She would simply order male prisoners to strip so she could look at their body. Yeah, kind of a sadist, sadomasochist type of attitude. She also staffed her house with young teenage prisoners. And she would dress very provocatively basically with her boobs hanging out. That was her game. And she was attractive in her youth. And so any man or boy that got aroused by this would be instantly killed. So she was playing these evil games. She also had one young boy that she considered her houseboy that worked for her for 2 years. He was a survivor. That she would allow one treat, and that he could have 2 boiled potatoes on Sunday. So she would have her cook, make them for him. He would take them out to the dormitory where his friends and family lived, and he would peel them and share the skins with people there because they were so hungry. So that's the only delicacy that this young boy got, was to eat 2 boiled potatoes. And he said that he would wear baggy pants and things, as baggy as possible. So even though everybody hated her, you're a young boy, you have hormones raging, you see somebody's chest just out, you could get aroused. So he would make sure that if he did get aroused, he couldn't be seen. It was at this time that a young Nazi doctor by the name of Dr. Erich Wagner started working there, and Ilse, who her and her husband are rumored to have had an open marriage, so they both dallied around. She began an affair with this doctor, and at the same time became quite obsessed with tattoos that a lot of the prisoners had. And she wanted the doctor to do medical testing, medical research on whether tattoos could be linked to criminality. Yeah, we're in that. And so she would ride around through the camp on her horse, have prisoners randomly strip, and so that she could see their tattoos. And the ones that she wanted to have experiments done on their tattoos, she would deem for the medical experiment. Of course, they did very cruel things to them, such as removing the tattoos and then observing them. Yeah, removing the tattoos. Think about that. To allow them to study their behavior, while the tattoo was on and after, and then eventually they would kill the prisoners. But what she started to do was think, I can make a profit off these tattoos. So she put together a crew of other Jewish prisoners that would take the tattoos that had been removed from these people that were being experimented on, tan it into leather, and use it to make things like book covers, lampshades, frame it, hang it on your wall, and she started a whole industry where she would use this to give gifts to SS officers. There were even rumors that she would take thumbs, toes, and make them into electrical switches in her house. I mean, just sadistic. She claimed in her trial at the Nuremberg trials that these were made of goat skin, not human skin, but there are plenty of witnesses that survived the camps that said no, they were tanning actual human skin into these things. And then, of course, because of her dalliances, she managed to give syphilis to her husband. He had the young orderly that gave him the diagnosis killed because he didn't want anybody to know, and their marriage basically fell apart, even though they had, at the time, 3 children. Her husband arranged a transfer for himself to Lublin to establish another concentration camp there, leaving his wife at Buchenwald. And she just ran wild, doing more and more of these hideous experiments. And these experiments were so terrible that eventually her husband was arrested by the SS and police in 1943 and tried for them. I mean, not just this, but this, as well as embezzlement, enriching his own family with government money, and murdering of prisoners for various reasons. Can you believe it that what they did was so bad, even the Nazis took offense to it? She was also arrested and imprisoned until 1944, where she was acquitted, mainly due to lack of evidence and that she killed a lot of people that would have testified against her. Her husband was found guilty and sentenced to death by the SS in Munich, and he was executed by a firing squad on April 5th, 1945, right as the whole war effort just fell apart. She managed to avoid any prosecution for this and was still alive and well when the concentration camps were liberated by the Allies in 1945 to 1946. She was tried by an Allied military court in 1947 and was sentenced to prison, where she was condemned in 1947. She actually had an affair with a male prisoner there and became pregnant and gave birth to a child, a son, in prison, and was forced to give the child up immediately for adoption. Eventually that sentence was reduced and she was released by the military governor of the American zone in Germany in 1948 after serving only 4 years of her sentence. It was then that another investigation was launched by the Allied court, and she was eventually arrested and sent to be tried with other German war criminals. It was at the second round of trials at Augsburg that she contended it was all goat skin and these were horrible lies. They weren't buying her bullshit, and she was sentenced to life in prison. She was sentenced to the Altac Women's Prison, and spent the majority of the rest of her life there. As I said, her and her former husband, her dead husband, had 1 son and 2 daughters. Their oldest son committed suicide when he was old enough to realize who his parents were and wanted nothing to do with that life, so he unfortunately took his own life under shame. Her 2 daughters married and eventually disowned her, wanting nothing to do with her. The son that she was forced to give away while she was in prison was named Yu. He found out who his mother was and started up a relationship with her at the age of 19, visiting her once a week, and she tried to manipulate him into helping her get out of prison. Together they wrote kind of her memoirs. He took her journals, everything, and spent most of his young life trying to get them published into a book so that to raise public sympathy to get her out of prison. And when she realized that wasn't going to happen, she hanged herself September 1st, 1967. Since then, her youngest son has tried to make deals with publishers to get out a very sympathetic view of his mother, but to no avail. And he basically retired to a quiet life after 1971, when basically every book publisher told him to go kick sand. I feel sorry for this young man. He had been in foster care, tossed back and forth until he was thrown on the street at age 18. Found out who his mom was. Your mom is a monster. So, of course, you want to believe that perhaps there's some good in your mother. So, I don't blame him. I feel sorry for him. But that is the sad ending of the Witch of Buchenwald. She's not the only person to inflict such atrocities, but she's certainly one of the worst, in my opinion. And with that being said, I'm going to end this, and we'll go into a much happier story maybe next, at least one with a happier ending. The Miracle of the Andes will be our next video. But until then, Keto and Crime.